Hey everybody, welcome to the back to school live stream. I forgot to open the thing that tells me if I'm live, so I'm sure I am. But I'm gonna just finish getting settled here, so if you're here early, thank you and welcome. I'm very excited about this stream because I love back to school time. Okay. Thank you for joining me live if you're here watching me just get set up. If you are watching the archive, great. Feel free to skip ahead a couple minutes once we get rolling. And I have some stuff I'm going to talk about today, but I'm also going to take questions. So much to talk about in back to school land. Okay, really should have opened this up beforehand because my poor computer can barely do anything now that I'm streaming. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about back to school, though I don't even see the chat. I want to say hi to you guys. If you're here, you're joining, you're just hopping in, please say hi in the chat. Make yourself comfy. We like to hang out and be friends on my streams. So, almost ready here, guys. I was going to do this stream at 4 o'clock my time, and I decided to do it at 3:30 to just get it going, and of course, here I am, not really ready, but you know. It's a Saturday, we're taking it easy, it's a holiday weekend, so some people are probably not even home, but I know there's a couple people like me who just chill on holiday weekends or work at home, so I figured I would do the stream now, and then it'll be up for all the people who catch it after, you know, some fun festivities for the holiday weekend. This is so unnecessarily complicated, but we're almost there. Okay. So, back to school time. I'm an expert on school because I went to way too much school, although I've been out of school for a long time now, and sometimes I miss it. I love being self-directed, but school was great too. I did my bachelor's. For those who don't know, we'll just go through my school background. So I grew up in New York, went to public school. For college, I went to the University of Hartford in Connecticut, which has the Hart School of Music. That's where I did my bachelor's degree in cello performance. And then right after that, I was there from 2006 to 2010. And then from 2010 to 2012, I moved to Boston. That's where I did my master's at the Laundry School of Music in early music performance. So those are my degrees. And 6 years of higher education is standard for classical musicians, but it is a lot of education. So I have a lot of experience with being in educational environments and learning, and I've been teaching for a long time too. All right, guys, this took forever, but I finally have what I need up so that I can see that the stream is working, though I've just been talking like the stream has been working this whole time. Okay. And what do I need to do to get this chat, like, really? Okay. 12 people here. Thank you guys for joining. We got off to a little bit of a rocky start because I just wasn't ready and I clicked go live anyway. But now we're here. It's back to school time. We're going to talk all about school. I'm going to take your questions related to school if you have them, and I'm just going to kind of riff on my own stuff about school. So like I said, I have a bachelor's in cello performance and a master's in a more specialized cello performance. So it was a lot of school. My master's program especially was very music history based. So I did a lot of research and writing in addition to all the performing and studying I was doing. And then my bachelor's degree, because it was a Bachelor of Music, there were just tons of music classes. Like I had 6 semesters of ear training, 6 to 8 semesters of music theory, 4 semesters of piano, and then, of course, chamber music orchestra, private lessons, recitals, the list goes on. Music school is a very demanding place. So I want to talk a little bit about all that stuff, and then we'll get into questions and everything else. So again, say hi in the chat, make yourself at home, and we'll get right into this now, because it took me a little while to get rolling. So I have a video on my channel that's pretty old now. It's from 2015. That is what I wish I knew in music school. So I kind of wanted to recap some of those points and sort of talk about them to kind of get the school conversation rolling. I personally, I already talked about, I was in school for a long time, and I will say, because I didn't take any breaks, like in my master's program, there were a lot of people that had taken time off in between their bachelor's and master's. I just went straight through with school. So about halfway through my master's program, I was so ready to be done. I really hated school a lot. And for me, that's just because I'm really self-directed. So assignments and homework and like do this kind of stuff, I could do it, but I would feel like a slave after a while. So for me, especially doing that much school in a row, I was very done with it. But I can really see the value of it. And of course, I missed it a lot once it was over. I was used to that structure. And even with, because I was doing performance degrees, just the structure of having like a regular rehearsal schedule and practicing for rehearsals and stuff like that, I'm a very structured person. So I really liked having the structure of school, even though I kind of wish I was like making my own decisions a little bit more. But yeah, so I have a lot of experience with taking auditions and just being prepared for school and classes. And I will say I pretty much got straight A's in all my school, though it's not that hard to get straight A's in college in a lot of things. I think they've said somewhere there's some statistic that the average grade given out in bachelor's programs is an A. So like it's not that hard to get good grades. You just like show up and do the work. But I will say, got a nice transcript and I'm qualified to give you advice on school. So let's get into some of these kind of like basic music school tips. And so I'm going to be kind of focusing on people who are going into a music conservatory or a music program. But a lot of this stuff can apply to like even if you're just going into senior year of high school and you're getting ready to audition for music schools, or you just do music at school, you're thinking about having a music career. I think all this stuff can apply. So we'll kind of get into it. And then I want you guys to just feel free to leave your questions whenever you have them. I'm going to just be checking it with the chat and getting to them as they come up. Or if they don't come up, I'm just going to talk about school for an hour. So here we go. So my first tip about getting into music school, because it can be very overwhelming. I think for a lot of us, like you're kind of a big fish in a small pond when you're getting ready to go to music school, because you were likely one of the best people at your school playing your instrument or whatever you were doing to be going off to music school in the first place. So because you're already in that tier, you were probably one of the better ones at your school, and if you got into a very good music conservatory, you're probably about to go from the top of the totem pole to the bottom. So that is a big adjustment. It can be good because you start to actually have people to, I don't really like the phrase look up to, but people to learn from and to aspire to maybe reach their level. So you can definitely, start to spread your wings a little bit in music school. But there's, of course, some ego stuff that goes along with that when you're used to being the best and you're no longer the best. It can be overwhelming. It can be intimidating. It's a very new environment, especially if you were just in a regular high school, not an arts high school or anything like that. So that's one thing just to be emotionally prepared for, but it's all good. I mean, when we want to grow and we want to get better, we have to be challenged. That's just how it works. So it's good to get yourself into an environment that's more challenging. I know for me, there were definitely some music schools that I auditioned at that I did get into. I was actually offered full scholarships at schools, and now being an adult with all my debt, I look back on those full scholarships and think, wow, that might have been a good option to go to the school that I could have gone to for free. But I really wanted to be at the best school that I could get into and have to work the hardest and be around the best players. So I went to a school where I got a little bit of scholarship money, but certainly not enough to pay for all the tuition. But that's how you get better. And I wasn't convinced, even as a 17-year-old, I wasn't convinced that if I went to a school where I was already going to be the best one, that would be the best for my musical development. So that's just something to keep in mind. Before I get into these tips, this is a great question, so I just want to take it right away. Have you ever gotten an overuse injury? If so, how did you deal with it? You've had yours for 4 months. I'm really sorry for one. And yes, I have a very long story about an overuse injury, and it was when I was getting ready for college auditions. It was when I was in high school. So for me, I must have been 15, 16, something like that, and I started cello late. I started in public school in 4th grade, so I was like 8 or 9, which isn't old age-wise, but I was not studying privately. I was just playing once a week at school, like another activity. It was like gym class. It was like I show up, I did it, and I left. So it wasn't until high school, 14 going on 15, that I started taking private lessons and understanding about practicing and actually learning about cello technique. So I got serious fast, and I was practicing way more than I ever had. It wasn't like I had been practicing most of my life and then I was getting serious for college auditions. It was like suddenly I was preparing for college auditions from like barely playing cello at all. So I was practicing like crazy. Like what I set for myself was like a minimum 3 hours of just audition repertoire practice before I could even play my stuff for orchestra or anything else. Like, I was just like a 16-year-old kid, like, I need to practice 3 hours a day. So that's what I did. But because of that, I did get overuse injuries. I had some kind of tendonitis. Basically, I had the classic string player problem, which is like these shoulder muscles in here, a little bit of neck stuff, but mostly like shoulders and back, like trapezius muscles around the shoulder blade. Like, that's where most string players get their injuries. So I started getting really bad pain. But it wasn't while I played necessarily, so it wasn't like, oh, I'm just clearly doing something wrong. It was definitely like the overuse injuries we all talk about, like suddenly your body just hurts all the time, it's super fatigued. I couldn't even fall asleep at night because I was in so much pain. And the worst part, I mean, it was a very complex problem to solve. I went to, I think, 5 or 6 different doctors when I was a teenager for this, all different kinds, physical therapist, occupational therapist, acupuncture. I actually never did chiropractic, but I did do acupuncture, various sports and massage therapy. I went to actually the occupational therapist that works at Carnegie Hall and works on famous musicians all the time, and saw him, and I got a lot of different kinds of like massages and everything like that, and it seems like nothing was going to fix me. Acupuncture actually helped a lot. And I will say no one thing fixed me, but the whole process, which was so hard for me as a teen, like all I wanted to be doing was practicing, and I was in so much pain, and I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't ignore it when I was playing, when I wasn't playing, and I needed to be practicing. But, you know, Yo-Yo Ma had a whole scoliosis episode at the height of his career. So this stuff happens, and you just kind of have to see what is there for you to learn from it. For me, I think what I learned the most, warming up is essential. Don't sit down and play your hardest excerpts and just go ham the second you sit down. You really need to warm up, play scales, get your body in the right zone, be focused on relaxing the tension while you're doing your warm-up, so scales are great for that. And then you have to stretch. As a string player, if you're playing for hours a day, even if it's just rehearsals, stretching is imperative. Like, what we do for our bodies is very unnatural, and no athlete wouldn't stretch. But for some reason, as musicians, we just neglect our bodies. So stretching and working that into my practice routine was really important. And like for me, spinal stuff, because posture is involved a lot, especially with cello, laying on a flat floor and allowing my spine to like straighten itself back out, doing like spine twists. I learned all sorts of stretches where you do like these kinds of things that all do your neck and and I still have like the craziest, most tense, like insane situation here from playing cello because we just overdevelop these muscles. But so warming up always, taking breaks, stretching, and in general just being, I think, lightly active with your muscles. I don't mean, they do say it's good to do some weight-bearing exercises to build the strength of those muscles, but of course if you do weight-bearing exercises to the point that you will have fatigue, that's an issue because you can't play with fatigued muscles. So you have to be very gentle with it, but I do think just improving your overall physical health. I was a very unhealthy teenager. I didn't do anything active or athletic at all. I think I started going to the gym and like doing some cardio a little bit sometimes when I like kind of cared, but in general I was not active. I ate a very poor diet. I was a vegetarian who ate nothing but carbs. I'd eat sugar at school all day. So even though I wasn't like, I didn't have any glaring health problems, I think all that extra inflammation in my body from just like eating a sugary bad diet was not helping my muscles recover and relax properly. I think I was just like inflamed all the time internally. So I learned a lot about just taking care of my body as a whole and how to respect my body when I needed it to do intense things like play an instrument for hours. So I really encourage everybody, if you even get the slightest thing, we all get the knots in our shoulders after we play, like just spending some time like rubbing out the knots, or it's great when you like are close with your stand partner and you can like trade off back massages during rehearsal breaks and stuff like that. Like whatever you can do to kind of keep yourself good and do the stretches, like that really made a difference. So I wouldn't say like stretching healed me, but after seeing many doctors and learning so many things about my body and how to take care of my body better, eventually the problem was gone. So I think it's really about having a holistic approach to your entire body is the best thing that will help. And then of course addressing your technique, making sure nothing in your technique is like overly tense, but that's kind of obvious. So that was a long-winded answer, but that was a very like intense experience for me as a teenager. So I like to bring it up because a lot of people do suffer with these injuries and feel powerless, but learning how to take care of your body goes a long way. What would be your advice for someone who's not going to traditional higher education but wants to get better at playing music on a serious level or on, okay. So you'd actually, these days, I mean, classical music is very institutionalized, so going to school is generally good for classical music, but for other types of music, music school is a great place to learn a lot and have all your education compounded in this one, building or campus or whatever, but you can learn all that stuff separately or on your own. You do not need college necessarily, especially if it's non-classical music. So the biggest thing is private lessons, and everyone knows even when you go to school for music, your private lessons are the most important thing you're doing because that's what's really getting you to be a real performer on your instrument. So taking private lessons is step one, and you can of course do that without college. If you want to learn more music theory, there are a lot of good online resources. I know Berkeley now even offers online music theory classes if you wanted to take an actual class. But there are websites. I forget what there's like musictheory.net. There's one called like Teoria. I have no idea how to spell it though, so this is not helpful. But I will say that there are lots of websites for both music theory and ear training, so you can learn on your own at home. YouTube is just an amazing resource in general. You can always look up stuff on YouTube when you want to learn a little more about something. I'm sure there are YouTube channels based around music theory and stuff like that, and then add private lessons on your instrument, and you're already getting a pretty well-rounded music learning without going to college. So yeah, let's get back into these tip things I was going to go through. So again, I'm drawing from this old video I made in 2015, which you can check out after this. Juilliard offers online free music theory? That's pretty cool. I'm about to take that class. I need to refresh. Doesn't matter how much music theory you take. When you stop exercising those muscles, you forget. I mean, I remember some things, but like when I think back to school, when I was really on my A game and like doing it all the time, I was so much sharper than I am now. Sad. But, use it or lose it. It's true, with knowledge, with everything. So I'm drawing from this old video from 2015 called What I Wish I Knew Before Going to Music School, or something like that. You can search my channel later if you want to check out that video. But I'm going to elaborate on a lot of the same points. So the first thing going into music school that I think is really important is to invest in what interests you. So when we're especially getting a bachelor's degree, we're kind of doing a broad survey of many things. Like I said, I had to take piano class, music theory, ear training. Ear training and music theory are separate, by the way. Music theory is like learning how to write down everything in your key signatures and analyzing stuff harmonically and basically that very in depth. Ear training is being able to recognize things by ear, so knowing, oh, that sounds like a major third, oh, I can sing a perfect fifth. Like, ear training is more about that practical application of understanding what you're doing musically, and music theory is more the writing down analysis. But they work together, but those were separate classes for me. So music theory, ear training, basic piano. Everyone who played any instrument had to still take piano class. I always talk about piano class because I was so bad, but so is everyone. And then music history, and I'm trying to think of music, and then I had a couple regular classes, like an English class. I sure hated my non-music classes that I had to take in college, though. You want to think about it. I had to take a science class with labs, and I waited until the end of my degree, so I was like a senior in college, basically ready to start a master's program, had done all this cello stuff, all this music, and I had to take like a science class with a lab. And I remember just being like, I would do anything to not be in this room right now. Hated that class. That was a tangent though. But so you have to do a lot of stuff in music school. Some of it non-music, lots of it music. And so I think it's really important to start to zero in on like, what is your passion? And you might not know that right away going in, and that's fine. That's why all those classes are there, for you to get exposed to everything and learn a little bit about it. But once you start being like, oh, I'm really drawn to this particular repertoire, I really want to play in a string quartet, or whatever it is that starts to draw you, invest in that, because these are the things that you're building that you may be able to continue to build on as a professional. Don't kind of let all your decisions be made for you. If something is really calling out to you, put your energy into that. Focus in on that. If there's a piece that you really want to play, see if you can negotiate for your chamber group to play that piano trio, like whatever it is. It's important to be investing in the stuff that matters to you, because that is great practice for the real world when all you're going to have is your own opportunities that you create for yourself, which I will get into. But so getting used to deciding what you like and learning how to take initiative is really, really important, because people get very passive in school, and it's good to be open-minded. It's good to allow your teachers to guide you a bit. But most people that I've seen in music school get so passive with just doing what's told and what they're assigned to do that by the time they're done with music school, they are clueless to what they want to do with their careers and their music and their life. Because they're like, well, no one's telling me what to do anymore. So don't get so passive. Invest in what matters to you. That's my first tip. What's a perfect fifth? So a perfect fifth, all the intervals have names, like on the piano. If you were to go through in a scale order on a piano, you would start with a C. If we're doing a C major scale, you would go to D. That would be a major third. To E, a major second. See, I'm doing great. Major second. Go to E, that would be a major third. Go to F, that would be what we call a perfect fourth. Go to G, that would be a perfect fifth. So basically intervals, which are the spaces between notes, can either be major or minor. There are certain intervals that are only major or minor. Those are the thirds and the sixths and the sevenths. Look how much I have to think about this now. And then there are what we call perfect intervals, which are the fourth, the fifth, and the octave, which do not have major or minor versions. They're just, bam, here's a fourth, here's a fifth, here's an octave, no major, minor option. So intervals just have names like that. Okay, so let's get into the next tip. If you joined late, welcome to my back to school stream. We always wing these live streams, but I thought it was a great time to just talk about back to school, because it's back to school season, of course. So I am going through some tips of some suggestions of what to think about when going into music school for the first time, but I want this stream to be open to even just going into like senior year of high school, getting ready for music auditions, starting a master's program, starting a PhD, like any kind of back to school. That's what this stream is all about. So if you have questions or thoughts, please throw them in the chat. I'm going to be answering all of them. Like I said, I have a bachelor's and a master's in music, so I've been through a lot of school. I'm pretty experienced in it. Happy to share all the stuff that I've learned. So we just talked about investing in what's important to you. So then the next tip is sort of going off of that, which is think big picture. Because again, with school and classes and assignments, it's very easy to get like tunnel vision and get kind of small-minded on like, I have to do this assignment and I have to practice this for this teacher and I have to do this. And while it's important to stay on top of all your details and it's important to get your assignments in on time, don't lose sight of the bigger picture. And to me, that's what's important to you. It goes back to tip 1, investing in what's important to you. And did I talk about prioritizing? No, so I will add that to this one, along with thinking big picture. When you think big picture, you have to prioritize what's most important, because everything can't be most important, and the big picture can't be every detail. So knowing for yourself the things you care most about, so that when you're suddenly have all this stuff thrown at you, like, I have to practice for piano, but I have to do my music theory homework, but I have to practice for rehearsal, but I have to practice for my lesson. Like, it's hard to manage all of that. So you need to know what are your priorities and what's most important to you to be learning right now. So if you can't let it be by like, oh, well, this teacher's the most aggressive, so I'll be sure I do that assignment. I mean, you can, but that's not giving you any skills for how you're going to prioritize all your different responsibilities when you're out of school. So again, school is like a little playground preparing you for the real world. So you want to use it in that way. You don't want to treat it like, yeah, the playground's awesome, and then suddenly you're booted out of the playground, and then what? Like, you got to just figure it out. Use the playground as your training grounds to get you ready for the real world, and that means figuring out what's important to you, prioritizing what is important to you, and, you know, making some compromises. I'm not saying don't do any of your assignments. I'm just saying that a lot of stress will come at you at once, and you need to have your own inner authority of, what do I want to do? What is most important to me? What do I think really matters here? So that you're not just overwhelmed, because I guarantee every teacher is going to act like their stuff matters the most. So you need to know what matters the most for you. Usually for most people, that's practicing for their private lessons. But maybe if you feel like you've got your piece really down for your lessons and you've been doing well, and you're terrible at piano and you've got a test in your piano class the next day, practice piano a little extra. Just have that voice inside that helps guide you with what to do. Because again, you're only going to continue to need that voice to guide you even more after school. So that's what the thinking big picture is about. And also, imagine possibilities for yourself when school is over. Like if you're playing in a chamber group and you think like, oh, I love this repertoire, I wish I could play this every day. Think about that, because when you're out of school, you could form an ensemble that focuses on that repertoire. Like, keep your mind open to these ideas and inspirations, because one of the great things about school is that so much is thrown at you in terms of information, opportunities, just there's so much that you can do in school, and it can be overwhelming, but if you can make note of the things that are really meaningful to you, you can continue to build on those after school. Were there any mature age students studying cello at your college, like people over 30? There probably was like a grad student or two that was in their 30s, because that's pretty common for master's and PhD programs. And there was a violist who was older, who I remember was like, less traditional school path. Like maybe she had a degree in something else and then went back to get her music degree. So we didn't have a lot of students like that, but there were a few. And it is possible. I mean, you're signing up to be in an environment with a lot of people who are younger than you. But educationally, you can really get, what you want out of it and make the most out of it. I wonder socially what it's like for the people who do that, who go to college with a bunch of like 19-year-olds, just for that element. But educationally, you absolutely can go back to school. Whether or not it's worth the debt and the cost really depends on your goals, because like I said earlier in the stream, someone asked about learning about music outside of a conservatory environment or a full-time student environment. You absolutely can learn lots about music outside of conservatory walls by taking private lessons and by getting tutoring or learning music theory online. There's a lot of options outside of school that might be a better fit for someone who's older, but it really just depends. So I can't speak from experience because I was always the youngest. My whole school, like even growing up, I was the youngest in my grade, and then I went straight to college, so I stayed the youngest in my grade. Like I was probably the youngest kid at my college when I was a freshman, so I was 17 for the whole first semester. And then when I went to grad school, I was 21 for the whole first semester of grad school. So like I've just always been the young one. But so I don't have personal experience with it, unfortunately. Okay, so let's keep going through these tips. I'm going to hydrate. So my third tip that I like for students going into music school is starting your online presence. Now, when I was in college, I remember when the first iPhone came out when I was in college, I think, because I went to college in 2006. And I feel like it was like 2007, maybe it was the first iPhone. I'm not really sure, but there was no Instagram, we were not on social media all the time. We would go home on Facebook on our computers, but like, that was basically it. It wasn't the whole smartphone culture. So I couldn't build my social media following while I was in school. And even in my master's program, I started using Instagram. That was 2010 to 2012. But I wasn't using it super for professional branding reasons. I was just using it for fun. But now, if I were a student now, I would absolutely be starting my social media following if I wanted to have one, which it's not for everybody, but many people do want to have a social media presence as a musician. So school is such a good time to do that because you are busy all the time. Like there is content around you every day. Like even if you're just doing a homework assignment, like that's a post, or you're in a practice room, make a little video. You're rehearsing with your friends, make a little video. Like there are so many opportunities to be building. I mean, I'm kind of thinking Instagram, but any social media that you wanted to, even if you were just putting up little videos on YouTube, you could be vlogging, your day at school. There's so many things you could be doing if you want to be putting out social media content that you can absolutely have endless opportunities as a student. So if you want to build your social media following, start in school. It's never too early to start. I know some people think, oh, don't put your playing up if it's not perfect, if you're still a student. if you really want to, you can delete things or make them private later when you're better at your instrument. But I have followed the model of share your playing, put yourself out there. That's what's worked for me. I know it's not the traditional model. It's not really encouraged, sadly, but it did work for me, and I believe it can work for anybody. So just put yourself out there and share a little bit of what you're up to at school. Your parents will probably like seeing it too. So I recommend starting your social media presence right away when you go to music school, if that's what you're looking to do long term. Let us keep going. I'm just gonna open up this other page. And I should see if anyone comments any questions on my Instagram post, but I'm not expecting it. Okay, next tip. Make note of who you like to play with or just who you respect at school. So again, once you're done with music school, you're going to be like, what do I do? Some people try to take orchestra auditions. That's a very, I'm not going to put it down, it's just a very, very difficult path that not many people succeed at. And it's you have to sacrifice kind of everything. You have to be willing to move wherever you get a job. Like, there's just a lot of things about orchestra jobs that are not ideal. Even if you get them, which is a very, very small percentage that you will even get the job, sadly. Because these days, orchestras have auditions and people fly out and prepare for months, and then the panel takes nobody. Like, it's a dismal world out there, I'm sorry to say, for orchestra auditions. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's not the best option anymore for being a successful classical musician, and the job satisfaction is actually fairly low for orchestra jobs, even though the security is there. I'd argue the security isn't even there, but there's at least a salary. It's one of the only salary jobs that exists for people like us. But I think there's a lot more you can do as a classical musician beyond just taking an orchestra job. So I'm speaking more to that, and you're going to be looking for people to play with, whether you want to form a chamber group. That's something a lot of people do after they graduate. Even if you just play a few concerts, or how official you make the group is up to you. But be paying attention and building those relationships in school. Almost every ensemble that I've seen, at least some of the members met in school together and played together and liked it and decided after school, hey, let's keep playing together. So have your eyes and your ears open for that. Doesn't mean that everyone's going to stay around in the same area after graduation, but a lot of people do. So it's good to be making note of that. And even if you're not necessarily going to end up in an ensemble with that person, making note of the type of musicians that you like to work with and understanding your own personal compatibility with other people in the music making process is really useful, because that's going to be what your life is all about once you're out of school. Whether it's playing gigs and meeting people for the first time or playing with the same people over and over, it's all about those interpersonal relationships. So keep that in mind when you're first in rehearsals getting to know people. Don't be too snobby, don't be too rude. That stuff can really bite you later, so just keep that in mind too. All right, and then I technically only had one more tip. Flying through this stuff, actually, except I guess I've been streaming. I don't even know when I went live. It's probably only been like half an hour, 32 minutes. So we got plenty of time. Okay, so last tip that I had, again, drawing from this old video of mine, take advantage of the opportunities that are for students only. There are many opportunities, particularly in classical music, that really are exclusive to students. I have my own beef with this because I've finished all my degrees at 23 years old, whereas many people are still getting their degrees at that age, and I was no longer eligible for so many things because sorry, I got distracted by an email. I should not have my phone over like that. I was not eligible for all these things that I wanted to do because I was no longer a full-time student, even though I was younger than so many people I knew who were getting their masters at the time. So it was frustrating, but it's good to know that when you are a student, you are qualified for certain things that you will not be qualified for afterwards. Things like grants, aka money, which we need to do projects or just to do anything in life. We need money. So certain grants are given to students to maybe like, or scholarships are given to go to a summer festival. Let's say you really want to do a summer festival. That's how I started doing period instrument stuff, performance practice with summer festivals. There are scholarships specifically for full-time students who want to study at a workshop, but they don't have the couple $1,000 it costs for the tuition and the room and board and everything else. So always explore the options. Usually every school has like some resource, whether it's like a document online or like a binder of stuff where there are all these things that you could possibly apply for. Doesn't mean you're going to get them all, but it's good to get in the habit of applying for things like that, because again, classical music relies on getting money from those kinds of sources. We don't really get them as much from like ticket sales at a concert. We get them from grants and scholarships and that kind of stuff. So if you can look into some of that stuff while you're a student, you can get some practice at applying for things like that and understanding how to get money that you need. That's going to be a big puzzle once you're out of school, is how do I get the money for this project? How do I make this happen when I don't really have the money to do it? So grants and scholarships are a big part of that. So that's worth mentioning too. So if you just joined recently, hi, welcome to the Back to School live stream. My favorite time of year, one of my favorite times of year, even though I haven't gone back to school in a while now. And I just went over 5 kind of takeaway tips when you're first going into music school. I did a video on this back in 2015 that was just sort of like getting people ready for music school, some things that you can be kind of doing to get the most out of your experience. So I kind of recapped some of those tips. You can watch the original video by searching What I Wish on the Emily Plays Cello YouTube, and you'll find the video because it's called What I Wish I Knew Before Music School or something. So you can watch that after if you want. But so I just went over some of that stuff. I am taking any questions related to back to school stuff, so please don't be shy. Feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk more about school for a little longer. One of the big things that I was really, really into in school was my handwritten planner. Like, I actually did not quit a handwritten planner until sometime after my master's program. Like, I just insisted on having the paper planner because certain things, like, I don't like them too automated. Like, I was writing down assignments and like little notes for myself, and I like to be able to write kind of free on a piece of paper. Like, even every day I still make a to-do list on a notepad, handwritten, because I like to be able to write in the margins weird or write a little bit different or something if I need to. So I always kept a handwritten planner for my assignments and rehearsal schedules and everything, and I was like religious about my planner. But anybody, whether you just do it on your phone, I actually had a Palm Pilot in college, if anyone even knows what that is. What happened to those? I'm Googling it, Palm Pilot. It was like before, oh, they look so funny now. They look archaic, but I thought it was the coolest thing in the world when I had it. I wonder what happened to my Palm Pilot. They came out in 97. A Palm Pilot was like a boring educational iPhone. I mean, not even educational, just like, it was for like calendars and scheduling and stuff. So I had a Palm Pilot, and I think I tried to do scheduling in it, but I was just like not into the online put it in types of scheduling. I like to just write stuff. So whatever works for you, but staying organized is so important. Like, I don't know how, like, I don't like keep lists because it's like fun. I do it because that's how I make sure I get everything done. And I remember someone once saying something actually about writing in music, that like, if you need to write something in the music to remind yourself of something, there's no shame in that, because now it doesn't have to bounce around in your head being remembered. It can go out on the paper, and now it's no longer in your head. It's on the paper. You can look at it when you need it. It's the same thing with remembering assignments or remembering to practice something from rehearsal. Like, taking notes is really valuable for that reason, and it's really how I survived juggling so many different things. So I definitely recommend keeping a planner in some kind of way. And if you decide to do it just purely digital, just make sure you're really good on both sides of whether it's syncing or just you don't want your calendar messed up and then you miss a rehearsal because of some digital problem. That's why I liked the paper stuff, even though my only option was my Palm Pilot, which was like a little bit, I guess there's a reason they didn't survive. But yeah, so that's another good tip in general for any school, is a planner. But sounds simple, but very necessary. Yes. cello is analog and paper planners are analog. I mean, it's true in classical music. So many people prefer paper written things anyway. But certain things I've been surprised. I forget. Sometimes when I see people still taking notes on paper, I'm kind of shocked just because writing by hand is so much slower than typing. But some people say they learn better when they write it by hand. And it depends how much you're writing. Like if you're only writing a little, I can see the value in writing by hand. But typing is so much faster. I remember, I'm just like a kind of wordy person. I can talk a lot. So I remember when I was a little kid, or not a little kid, I was maybe like 9. I wanted to have a journal, but I couldn't keep up my hand with my thoughts. So I started a typed journal on the computer because I just couldn't deal with how long it would take to actually write out my thoughts. So there are benefits to both, of course. For classical music, we're still going to be using paper sheet music for the most, though on one of my previous lives I was talking about how, especially here in LA, everybody uses iPads for music now. And the whole battle of paper music versus digital and the pros and the cons, it really, there are pros and cons on both sides, and it is kind of personal preference. I don't think one is better than the other, but there is something nice to be said about holding your paper music and touching the page and writing on the page. Like, I like that aspect. But if it's like a gig and you're going to throw the music away the second you're done with it, yeah, use digital. Why not? Palm Pilots were before smartphones, so yeah, it does make sense. They didn't have a web browser. Yeah, so it was basically like a little calendar. I don't remember if it had anything else. Probably like notes and calendar, and like what else are you going to do on a Palm Pilot? It might have had like a game. I don't even think it had a game. I really like your comment about not being afraid of posting imperfect playing. I find it inspiring to see musicians' work in progress. It helps musicians be more relatable to their followers. Yeah, I totally agree. I talk all the time about this, but this obsession with perfection, particularly in classical music, is very unhealthy, and I don't think it's doing a service to anybody. I think it's just helping kind of like dig the music deeper into its grave. So I've tried to really be an outspoken voice about that, even though, I know not everyone in the community is going to agree with me, but just we can't keep obsessing about perfect playing, because I've been to concerts of incredible players and they don't play perfectly live. Like, nobody does. I've seen Yo-Yo Ma in the 3rd row at Lincoln Center. Like, sounded kind of like, whoa. I mean, he sounded great, but just like, especially 3rd row in a big concert hall, you can hear some like edge on the sound because he's playing to the people in the last row. But point being, like, especially this overly manicured idea of how perfect everything is supposed to be. It's not even like music making at that point. It becomes this robotic, technical thing that, yeah, maybe the snobs in the audience will think, oh, it's so perfect. But like, we should be catering to the average person who just wants to come and have a beautiful time and have a great experience and be moved by the music. They're not moved by the slightest bit of how in tune or out of tune something is. They're moved by the overall expression, which unfortunately we are suffocating with our obsession with perfection, is destroying the artistic voice inside all of us. And it's really sad. I mean, I went to so many, I had before I went to official music school, I did a summer festival called Hartwick in upstate New York. So I did one summer festival as a high schooler, but that was a great experience. Big orchestras, big master classes. Like, it was a good exposure to that kind of environment. Then I did 4 to 5 different festivals during my college years, all early music related. And then I've run workshops, professional workshops. I still help run Baroque Cello Boot Camp, which happens at Harvard every winter. I've been running it remotely since I've been in LA, along with my previous teacher. But so anyway, I've been in these environments all the time with so many players and all these different performers of different levels, everything. And then you add 2 different colleges where I got my degrees. And I would hear people play who were the top of their instrument or the top of the class or the top of the school, whatever you want to call it, and so rarely was I moved by any of these people's playing. And like, I loved music, and I was a performer myself. You think it wouldn't be that difficult to find someone who gave a moving performance. But I was shocked at how unmusical and how technical everything was, just about the technique. Like, oh, this person's the best because they can play the hardest piece the most in tune. It's just like, and that's gonna make people buy tickets? Like, why do you think nobody's buying tickets to any of these freaking concerts? Why do you think all these ensembles are going under with no money? Because we're trying to make it perfect and we're not even making it musical anymore. Like, come on, guys. Pretty obvious to me, especially these days now. I used to try to be a little more politically correct how I said that stuff. Now I'm just kind of like, it's plain to see, classical music people. It is plain to see. So, you know, I want it to be the change. I try to continue to be the change that, of course we need technique. Of course we need to practice. Of course we need to be the best we can be. But that's not everything, and it's totally imbalanced. And, you know, for my own story, which I've talked about so many times on this channel, it's getting tiring even to me, but, you know, I was told in college, like, I wasn't told, like, oh, you should quit, but I was basically, like, sort of treated like, oh, what are you doing here? Like, you're never going to be a cellist. Like, you started too late, and, like, you know, you're just, like, not good. Because it was basically because I started late. You know, nobody had my background. Everybody had, like, 10 years of private lessons on me. So it wasn't like, oh, she doesn't get it, she's stupid. It was just like, well, you started cello really late, so, like, your technique isn't that good. So, like, how are you ever going to do this? And I just practiced a lot, and I made up for lost time, and I ended up I remember at the end of my master's program, my teacher saying to me, like, you're not behind anymore. Like, you got to stop. Because I was just, I'm behind, I'm not as good as, everyone's better than me, like, I work so hard and I'm still not good enough. Like, that was just, like, that was my inner monologue for so many years of being at school and being the worst one and everything. My teacher had to be like, you are not behind anymore. Which took a lot of sinking in. So for one, if you start early enough, like I was 17 when I went to music school, and you really buckle down, you can catch up. It's hard, takes dedication, and takes a lot of blows to your ego, but you can catch up, especially when you first get to music school if you do the best you can and really work. But nobody seemed to care. Occasionally I would get a teacher who cared, but like I was always extremely musical. That was like the one thing I had going for me, was like the creative and the artistic expression always flew out of me very naturally. It was just getting all the technical stuff to be at the level it needed to be was what I had to do. And it was like, I never got teachers, or rarely did anyone say to me like, oh, your musicality is so great, we just need to work on your technique. It was just right to like, all right, that's out of tune, no, that needs to be better, you gotta practice that. Like, there was no acknowledgement for my musicality, so I just had to go through the world being like, well, I know I'm musical, so like, hopefully that'll pay off for me in the end, but for some reason, nobody at school and none of my teachers seemed to care that I'm musical. And, like, these people who look like they're playing a math test while they're performing are somehow better than me because their technique is better than me. But, like, watching them, it doesn't even look like they're connecting to anything other than reading the notes off of the page. So, like, why is that person better than me? But, like, that was the environment, sadly. But I will say, I got myself out of that environment. I finished my degrees. I got into the real world. And suddenly being musical mattered again. Because connecting to people is what actually matters. And so once I was able to put myself out there, Instagram was a big one, obviously YouTube was another, and I was able to connect with real people who just wanted to listen to music and connect to something and enjoy it and appreciate it. Once those people were the people listening to me, then I started to get people who were fans, who would listen to my albums, who would come to my concerts, who would follow my pages, because I was connecting with real people, not music school people or audition boards or other classical musicians. It's like all those people have their heads in the wrong place. So I kind of like to remind people, like, there's a whole world out there of people who would love to hear your music, who are not going to criticize you, who are not going to hear everything that's wrong with it. So put yourself out there for those people and see what happens. And for me, I built a whole beautiful career out of it. And I will say, you know, and I've talked about on this channel my career transition after being freelance classical for 7 years and how I've sort of transitioned in the last year or so. That is not because of the fans and the people. That is because of my direct colleagues and all the people that I have had to deal with in this world being a classical musician. So not targeting anyone specific, but I have had to deal with so many people who I think their heads are completely in the wrong place, that I started to feel like the classical world maybe wasn't the best place for me long term. Not because of the people who love to listen to the music, but because of the people who make the decisions and the people that I would be playing the gigs with and the people who were out here doing it were not people who I believe were focused on the right things. Doesn't mean those people aren't out there. I have met a couple of really amazing players who do have the right attitude and who are successful as a result. So I don't want to act like it's nobody. But it's certainly a minority still, which is very disappointing, but it's why I'm always going to be saying this message, because I want the younger generation especially, like the kids who are teens now and going into music school, I want them to change this and get classical music to be something that's accessible again, that people can just enjoy, that isn't this like disgusting race for perfection, because it's not serving anybody that way. Did you guys expect a rant today? So that was kind of a lot. Let's see if we got any questions on the Instagram post. I don't think we did, but we'll just see. And we're going to wrap in the next 5 or 10 minutes. So if you guys have any questions, if you join late, definitely check out the stream. It'll be archived after it's done being live. It'll take, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, and then it'll be up for you to watch. You can check the beginning again. Yeah, I know, I thought there were going to be so many things to talk about, because back to school, such a big topic. But I talked about planners. It's probably the most back to school we're going to get. And, I could go through this stack of books that I posted, which has some of them good music books. So maybe I'll do that to wrap up after I check this. No questions. Okay. Let's look at the stack of books. This was like all my good music books. I'm not a big book person, but I do have some good books. Yeah. You can see I'm not a book person. Let's see what we got here. These are going to be like a collection of books that I haven't read, but that I own. This is a beautiful book. This was a gift from a student when I moved, and I read some of it, and I should read more of it. It's about the Bach cello suites. Very famous cello book, as you guys probably know. It's about Casals, Pablo Casals, and because he kind of did the revival of the Bach cello suites. So this is a good read. This is one I got when I was really pretty young, New Directions in Cello Playing, which I believe was for these are all like dusty from my bookshelf. This is a good one for pain and injury. I think that's what this book was recommended to me for. Introduces natural, tension-free ways of playing and anatomically improved techniques that prevent performance-related injury. New Directions in Cello Playing. So for cellists dealing with any kind of injuries, good one to check out. It's pretty easy to read kind of book. Now these ones, when I was first getting into Baroque stuff, I got, like when I was doing summer festivals in college, I got some books on Baroque music to learn a little bit more. This is like a fun, easy read. I haven't read it in years, but this was one that was kind of fun. This is like one of those books where they talk about music history and really old stuff in very like modern conversational language, so it's kind of like funny and easy and accessible. So definitely if you're interested in like Baroque repertoire specifically and you want to just like get a little more immersed in the world, this is a good one. This was a more dense one that I read when I was first getting into historical performance, and look, it's even still got, let's see what I posted it. Tempos. Oh, okay. Man, I probably could have done a whole lecture if I had looked at this stuff ahead of time. I should reread this book. But, like, for example, we always have tempo markings, allegro and stuff. How fast is that really? This has like a reference table for Quantz, who wrote one of the 18th century treatises that we use for historical performance, and talks about what these tempos actually were. Allegro assai is quarter note equals 160. Allegro is quarter note equals 120. I mean, kind of obvious stuff, but I bookmarked that for some reason. So this is more of like a actual, like textbook type book with references and stuff like that. Question, we're going to interrupt the book stack for a question. What's it like to be a classical musician in LA? I'll be totally honest that I am not doing full-time classical now that I'm in LA. I've been in LA 2 years now, and I did come here as a full-time classical musician, but then I started transitioning, so I do a lot more like pop music now and other stuff outside of cello, because the classical music scene in LA is really different than Boston and New York. It's a lot less classical and a lot more like film scores, TV music, just stuff that's a little bit more modern and contemporary. Nothing wrong with that, but that wasn't really my interest in cello. Cello for me was always about the old music, and there weren't as many groups out here doing that kind of stuff, especially smaller groups like chamber groups, like what I used to do back in Boston. So I did not take as much classical work once I started living out here, though I do still have private students that I teach. It's not the same kind of classical music scene as the East Coast, a lot more contemporary. So you can make a living. Making a living as a freelance classical musician in a city is never easy, but that's the only life I know. So it really depends on what kind of work you want. Like if you get in good doing wedding gigs or something, you can definitely make money that way. For me, it's always been teaching private lessons has been like a big source of income for me. I do that out here in LA, just like I did back in Boston, though I will say in LA, there are not as many kids who take orchestra at school. So surprisingly, most of my students out here in LA are adults who just want to take cello for fun. But I teach all ages, so it doesn't really matter to me. But in Boston, like string programs were a pretty big thing. So there were lots of schools that had like 20 cellists who all needed a teacher. It's not really like that as much out here, and LA is also more spread out, so getting around the city is a little more complicated. So like anytime you move to a new city, it's a different set of variables, but it's always kind of the same different pieces coming together. Gigs, you can plan your own concerts if you want, and rent the venue and front the cost and pay it back through ticket sales or fundraising. For me, I've always done my stuff at home, like my YouTube videos, my produced albums, and then my teaching. So I've always put my career together kind of by doing my own stuff in addition to whatever is local. So it just depends. Let's get back to the book stack. So when and I will continue to take questions, I'm just going to keep going through these books. In my master's program, we had to learn about teaching artistry. So basically what being a teaching artist is like you're not a full-time classroom teacher, you're a performing artist of sorts, but that can come in and do a lecture or work with kids or do some sort of teaching as an artist. So that's what a teaching artist is. So this Music Teaching Artist Bible is all about going into classrooms and kind of doing interactive types of lectures with either kids of all ages, any kind of students. So I had to read this for a class. But if you're interested in doing teaching artist stuff, I definitely recommend it. And I used to do a lot of that. Like I would do guest lectures in public schools about period instruments. Like I'd bring my 2 different cellos, I would play on both of them, I would talk about the constructional differences, stuff like that. So I used to do a lot of like lectures in classes. I've even done lectures in prisons. Like I've just like done a lot of outreach stuff talking about classical music. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, which is definitely a good thing to do in your career in general, it's teaching, it's music related, it's educational, this is a good book to check out. If you begin to feel like music has lost its magic, how do you cope with that? So I've got a good video on my channel already about that called something with the word inspire. So if you search my channel for the word inspire, or just go to instructional videos, either instructional videos or vlogs, but it's on my channel somewhere. Basically how to re-inspire when you're stagnating. So I have like a formal video about that. But there's a couple of things. And the problem with burnout, which is usually the reason that we experience something like that, is that we don't always have a choice. Like if our work schedule is full and we have things we're already committed to, and we're burnt out, we still have to do those things. Or if we're in school and we have assignments that are due, like we can't always get out of everything. That's the easiest fix, of course, is to lighten your load and like take off some of the things that are causing you to stress. Because basically everything, when we do it too much, it's no longer fun. That's just how it works. And I try to, when I talk to people about music or wanting to be a professional musician of any kind, I try to explain to people, like, sometimes just having it as a hobby is great, and maybe you should just keep it there, not because you couldn't be a professional, you couldn't be successful, but you have to be willing to, like, let the magic be lost sometimes. Like, that's the sacrifice you make when you make anything your career, is that it's not going to be fun and games all the time. Sometimes it's going to really be a grind or a drag, or you're going to be like, why am I even doing this? I mean, for me, I don't question, like, deep, like, things. When I commit to something, I'm committed to it, and it doesn't get questioned. So I never ask myself, like, why am I a musician, or why did I become a cellist? Like, I've never asked myself stuff like that, but I understand the feelings of, like, this life is hard, or this sucks, or whatever. So for one, taking a break is the most useful. So if you can't manage it with deadlines or commitments, find the earliest time that you can take that break and that you can detach from everything, and just take that time for yourself. And go do something that inspires you in some other kind of way. It can be something literal, like going to someone else's concert, but sometimes you might find, if you're so burnt out, going to a concert just reminds you of all your stuff and it doesn't help. So maybe you have to go for a bike ride, or maybe you have to go watch a movie, or just you have to do something that completely removes you, for one, so that you can release all the stress, because the stress and the burnout is what causes losing the magic. So you have to find a way to detach from all of that stress and just get to a different place emotionally for a second. And then once you're there in that place, find what inspired you in the first place. Like, for me, sometimes it would be listening to, like, some really great recordings of, like, for me, I would listen to gamba music. Listening to cello music was too close to home. Like, I would just think of the repertoire and think about playing it. But the viola da gamba is one of my favorite instruments. Sounds a lot like a cello, and I love the repertoire. So, like, I would listen to viola da gamba music, and that would really inspire me with the classical music side, without feeling like a direct connection to something I needed to be practicing. But whatever it is, you have to find what inspired you and kind of get back in touch with that. Let all the responsibilities and the stresses and the failures and all that stuff you have to remove yourself from that and get back to that place of, like, what does this mean to me? How does this make me feel? Why do I want to be doing this? You have to find that again. So I think that's the best way to go about it. And in terms of how many hours a day should someone practice to get into music school, it really depends on the student. Like I was saying earlier, for myself on the stream, I used to do 3 hours a day when I was 16 of audition practicing. That's for a string player. A wind player or a singer couldn't really put in the same hours. A pianist can put in the most hours. Your instrument does affect how many hours a day you can play without it becoming detrimental to your body. String players can play a while. But if you are doing 3 hours or even more than that, you should be stretching, you should be taking breaks, you should always be doing your warm-ups. I learned that the hard way, as we already discussed earlier in this stream. But I think 3 hours, it can be broken up with an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the evening, is a good goal to feel like you're really putting the work in. Now we're getting all the questions, and I have this huge stack of books on my lap that we're never going to get through. It makes me feel really smart, though, like I never do anything with books, so like just holding this, I'm like, yeah, I'm so educated right now with these books that I've barely read. What was your experience like pursuing a master's degree in music? So I loved my master's program, but like I said, I was burnt out because I went straight from bachelor's to master's, and it was just a lot. But I was really excited because in my master's program, I was able to really focus. Every master's program will be more specialized than a bachelor's. But for me, my master's was early music, and like that's really what I wanted to be studying. So the fact that all my classes and like everything I was doing was early music related, like I was so thrilled. So I really loved my program. It was a very small program, so I think there were only like 10 or 12 of us in the early music department. So I was with the same people all the time, rehearsing with them in classes, and they became like some of my closest friends. I still love them dearly. A lot of them were singers, so I learned so much about being an incredible early music or just any kind of singer from working with these singers in my program. You just get to go so much more in depth and really devote yourself and really kind of get lost in it, whereas like a bachelor's program is about like, go to class, get that done, hand in the homework, okay, now you're done. The master's program was like, at least for me, where I went, like settle in, like we're here for a while, we're going to get deep, we're really going to go into this. And I really liked being at that level, because for me, I like to have like more of a specific focus, and I don't like things that are too like general or generic. So being laser focused on certain things, like my classes for my master's program were like the papal courts of Rome, and it would just be like all the music that they played in the papal courts of Rome. And then it would be like my singer friends had medieval classes just on Pythagorean medieval music. And then we had French cantata, so just French sacred music only. Like, just, we got to get so specific. German cantata, just German sacred music. Like, we really got to go in depth, and that's, I think, the beauty of a master's program. But where I went, the Longy School of Music, which is now owned by Bard College, the early music program there is really stellar. It's a small, like I said, not that many students, but very in-depth. Like, I know other early music programs are sometimes a little more generic, like high Baroque, Bach, Vivaldi, and Handel. But, like, my program was a lot more of the more in-depth, obscure repertoire, which just was perfect for me. I like the idea about a book preventing injury. Are you also a singer? I am not a singer by any official terms. I am a singer-songwriter as a separate project. That's a lot of what I'm doing out here in LA. But I don't call myself a singer because I don't identify as a singer. I identify as an instrumentalist and a songwriter. My musicality is more in my brain than in my throat. But I do sing a little bit. Hello, Emily. I've seen many different types of Baroque bridges, bows, string gauges, and sizes, big Italian, small French piccolos. What can you tell us about that? So I'm not like a super instrument expert. Like, I don't have a lot of like luthier knowledge. Basically, the way I've always handled either getting my instrument into different conversions to be Baroque or getting repairs is I just find a luthier that I really, really trust, and I go to them and let them make those kinds of decisions. So I don't know totally a lot about even string gauges and stuff like that. I haven't experimented a lot. I do know that I like wider gauge gut strings as a general rule. I like the thicker strings. In terms of the body of the instrument, neither of my instruments, my modern or Baroque, are actual period instruments. One is from, my modern cello was built when I bought it in 2003, and my Baroque cello was built in 1950 as a modern cello and then partial converted, so over to a Baroque setup. So I don't have a lot of experience with like even just different bodies of instruments from French and Italian, that kind of thing. Bridges, either I had my Baroque bridge just custom fitted to my cello. So if you had asked me about bows, I know a little bit more about the different types of bows, but I actually couldn't tell you too much about the instrument specifics that you asked. And yes, people make Baroque jokes at me all day long, especially because the Europeans don't like that we say Baroque. They say Baroque in Europe. Baroque. So, like, if you don't say it the Italian way, they're like, why are you saying it like that? And yes, I mean, I get cello jokes too. I get them all. There's no shortage of bad puns everywhere I go with my instrument. Let's get back to my stack of books. Performance Success. This one I definitely recommend. I am going to see what this I read in college. Interesting. I'm like about to read this book. Sorry, I forgot what I was doing. It's like, wow, I got to read this again. So I had a lot of physical performance anxiety in college, and I still continue with it, and I've come up with my own coping strategies. It was a long process, especially when you play a very technical instrument. If you have any kind of physical nervousness, it's very problematic. Lots of people deal with sweaty hands. For me, it's shakiness, and that was really, really hard for me because shakiness comes from an elevated heart rate, and like, how can you stop your heart rate from elevating? It was very complicated. So this is a book that was recommended to me by the last modern cello teacher that I studied with, Julia Lichten. She teaches, I think she's the head of the string department at Manhattan School of Music. And I was studying with her outside of a school environment. But she recommended this book, which has a couple different techniques for pre-performance and even practicing that sort of do like kind of meditative type stuff where you sort of like find your inner self and you're like doing breath exercises and stuff. So Performance Success is a good one if you deal with any kind of anxiety with performing, which we all do. So it's a good book for that. Now, a bunch of these are scores, so I don't have to really go through them. But having these little handy scores, it's just like if you're studying any kind of piece, it's really nice to have these little, what's this publisher? Dover makes these little nice scores. St. Matthew Passion. I think this one was a gift. But if you're a super nerd like I was in high school with my friends, you can bring this to a concert and go to a concert and sit there and read the score like a nerd. But we did that sometimes in high school. I actually don't really like doing that because, one, I don't like score reading in general. It's like too many lines. And I like to watch the performers. But if you are like a super scholarly type, you can bring it to a concert. Or if you're performing a piece, it's very handy to have a score like this that you can just reference and be like, oh, when I'm playing that part, they're playing this part. It's just good to have these scores. So here are the ones I have. St. Matthew Passion by Bach, of course. The 6 Brandenburg Concertos, classic for any string player especially. Gotta have the Brandenburgs. So I have this one. Brahms Symphony No. 4 in E minor, which is actually really funny because I was just talking to somebody about this piece. I might have bought this because we were playing it. I know we played this in my first semester at college. The symphony orchestra, I had to play Brahms 4 excerpts for my seating audition. So that's probably why I got this, to have the score of the symphony. So I have this Brahms 4. Schubert Piano Quintet. I think I must have done this in a chamber group too. I think I bought scores for all the pieces that I was playing. And especially, oh man, there's stuff written in this. This looks like my college boyfriend's handwriting because I definitely made him help me with my music theory homework. Always make sure your boyfriends are smart so they can help you with stuff. Yeah, I guess I had to do for this, I'm having like a memory lane time. I had to probably do harmonic analysis for a music theory class, meaning I needed my boyfriend to help me with the harmonic analysis. So that's what's here in this Schubert. But yeah, obviously you buy one of these scores, you can write all over them and make notes for yourself. Very handy. Okay, now we're out of dumb score books, so I saw there was another question. Yeah, I really recommend these little books of scores. They're so cute. In a Baroque ensemble, how many cellos or violone is historically acceptable? It really depends on the size of the whole ensemble and also the repertoire. Like for some repertoire, one cello and one violone is plenty. But for some things, like I was just looking at the Brandenburg Concertos, there's 3 cello parts and a violone part. So the minimum you could have is 3 cellos and 1 violone, and you could easily have 2 people on each part. So the repertoire really determines that also. You just said how many is historically. You can always go low, like you can lowball it because they were dealing with smaller groups back in the day. They didn't necessarily have a bunch of musicians on hand at every single church where they were playing. So having one on a part is a very common modern day Baroque strategy, but it works. So I think it's always better less than more, but it depends. St. Matthew Passion or like a big work, you would want obviously more than one person on a part for the most part. So it just depends on the repertoire. No good answer there. Okay, we're getting down. So this, I think I started trying to read this in high school. This is about what, the Emerson Quartet? Which quartet? Guarneri is what it is. Yeah. Did I read this in high school? So let me show you guys this book. Indivisible by 4 is about a professional string quartet, Guarneri, and I really liked their recordings in high school, and so this is kind of a cool to, chamber groups. It's like basically the classical music rock band is like a string quartet. So just kind of hearing about their life and their story together was interesting. So that's what this is. Of course, my book stack is now like all over the place. This is a quick, easy little book. I don't know what I got this for, but just to know music theory terms. I wonder if this book is even still in print. It just looks so like random and ghetto, but I still have it. Augmented interval, augmented major seventh. Yeah, it's basically like a little music dictionary. Definitely handy. I mean, especially these were like before we Googled everything. It's like when I got these books, so I get that now we can Google everything, but sometimes it's nice to have a book. And then, of course, Harvard music dictionary with the cellist on the front, because of course there's a cellist on the front. This, it's a music dictionary, so it also is just a reference. It's not like a novel to sit down and read. And again, who looks stuff up in books anymore? I don't know, but I really wanted this when I got it, and I still have it. So it's a good one to have if you want to have books, if you're a book person. They probably have I wonder if they have an online version of this dictionary. They should. Well, since I went through that whole stack of books, we really added a lot to the live stream, but I think it was a fun little reading list too. Alright guys, so now I think we're going to wrap up. Thanks so much to everyone who tuned in. Like I said, if you missed the beginning, you can check it out once it's archived. I do these live streams once a month. Yeah, once a month, usually towards the end of the month. I do a live Q&A. Sometimes I theme it like I did today. Sometimes it's just a random open Q&A. And so if you are new to my channel, one of the big things I'm looking for, if you are a classical musician, especially if you play early music or period instruments, but even if you just play any classical instrument, I'm trying to feature more and more players on my channel besides myself. So if you're interested, if you either have a video that you have filmed of yourself or your chamber group, or you can film yourself and you're interested in being featured on my channel, go to emilyplayscello.com/collaborators. There's a little form you can fill out. I'm always looking for new people to feature on my channel. I've featured some really awesome people, really cool instruments too. So if you're interested in that, definitely fill out the form and we can just talk about it. And I do the audio mixing, so I make sure the video sounds great. So definitely check that out if you're a classical musician and you want to get a little more online exposure. That would also include, besides just being on my YouTube channel, which is at 10,000 subs or something like that now. Also on my Instagram, I'll feature you, which is 26,000 followers there. So it's a great boost if you're looking to build your social media following as a classical musician. So definitely consider that. And you can, of course, still stream my albums. Just today, I got a little note from someone who purchased my whole discography on Bandcamp, which I forgot that I even have that stuff on Bandcamp, but I do. So if you're interested in hearing my music, there's of course tons of videos here on my channel, and then there's my studio albums, which are all self-produced albums, Bass Sounds Evolved, and then my album with my violinist friend Laura called Old Friends, which I recorded last year, which is baroque violin sonatas on period instruments with just violin and cello. All of that stuff is on my Spotify. You can just search Emily Davidson on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, wherever you get music, and you will find my discography. And anything else? I do social media consulting for musicians specifically to help get them off the ground. I just started working with a couple new people this summer, and that's been really fun. So if you're looking to just you want some help getting your social media going because you kind of don't know what to do, I'm here to help. I built my whole social media following on my own from the ground up before anybody was doing it, so I learned a lot along the way, and I really want to pay it forward to more classical musicians. So if you want to see me for consulting, you can go to emilyplayscello.com/social media. That's how you can apply for that. And then I do offer private cello lessons over Skype also, but I'm kind of getting close to full up on that. But if you are dying for cello lessons over Skype, I also offer that. All right, guys. Well, this was a fun time. I'm wishing everybody who is going back to school a great school year, on the right foot, nice and focused. And if there's something in here, a topic that intrigued you that you think I should do a whole video on, leave a comment or something. Always open to hearing what kind of stuff you guys want to hear more about. And definitely check out my older videos on all these topics too. Alright guys, thanks again for watching. Oh yeah, give the video a thumbs up if you haven't already. That helps recommend it to other people if you found it useful. And I will see you either on my next live stream next month. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you hit the bell, then you'll always know when I'm going live. Or I'll just see you when I see you. I'm at Emily Plays Cello everywhere, Instagram, Twitter, etc., Facebook. All right, bye guys. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.